The Sports Source is brought to you by Fast Frame. Turn your memorabilia into a work of art.
You are watching East Tennessee's first and only year-round sports talk show on television. This is The Sports Source with your host, John Pennington.
Good Sunday morning, good Super Sunday morning, and welcome into the Sports Source. Happy to have you with us today. We have a packed show for you. We've got a big crowd of guys here today, an 8-man panel to discuss Vol football, news coming out of the football program, stuff going on over there, stuff that could be going on. We'll get a lot of takes and opinions on Vol football. Vol basketball, bad loss last night. What does it do to the tournament resume for Tennessee? We'll look all through that. Signing day reaction, we'll have that. We've also got a new guy on the set. So the hazing begins in the first segment. Let's dive right in. This first part of our program is brought to you by Tennova Healthcare. And if you find yourself in need of medical attention, you can always find a Tennova facility nearby in East Tennessee. An award-winning staff, top-flight equipment and instruments, Tennova can provide the best care to get you back on your feet. They are the absolute best. I've trusted them for years. Tennova Healthcare and Tennova.com to learn more. Want to welcome in this first wave of panelists. Jimmy Himes back with us. Good to have him. New guy, Jesse Simonton from SECCountry.com. Welcome aboard.
Appreciate you having me.
Jesse has to work with his cohort there at SEC Country, Mike Griffith. So, wow, you're going to get it all week long this week with Mike Griffith. And Chuck Cavaleris down there. Always good to have Chuck with us. Let's start with Jesse because you cover recruiting. It's one of your duties there at SEC Country. We'll get to the actual numbers on this Tennessee class in a second. Not a lot of fives. One, if you go by some ratings. None, if you go by rivals. A lot of 3-stars. But we'll start with, do you think they filled needs?
Mostly. Tennessee wanted to restock the cupboard at tailback. They signed 3 guys, highlighted by 4-star U.S. Army All-American Ty Chandler. They wanted to get more athletic on the defensive line. They did that as well. This class has Bob Shoop's fingerprints all over it. They wanted to be malleable, get a lot of versatility. Linebacker Solon Page is a guy that I think a lot of people slept on and is underrated. They really like him. They wanted to get more athletic, and they did that.
Okay. When we look at the numbers, and this is what most people do, of course, it's quantify anything in this world. Let's go ahead and look at the recruiting rankings, judging Tennessee by 4 different services, if we have those. There we go. The 2017 rankings for this week. You see, Rivals had them 15th, ESPN 15th, Scouts 16th, 24/7 17th. All right, well, how does that compare? We look back over the last 10 years, and this is just using 24/7's ratings. 17th this year, they were 14th last year, 4th in 2015, 7th in 2014, and 24th in that go-between year from Dooley to Jones. You go back over the 5 years prior to that, you're basically up, but we jumped ahead. So your average points over the last 4 years, this is Rivals ranking right here. So you don't have to read all the little numbers. What you do need to look over at the number on the left. Over the last 4 years, Rivals doesn't just have now star ratings. The star ratings are based off point totals. So the players all get point totals. Alabama, number 1 in the SEC over the last 4 signing classes. You look at their total number, 3,100 points. Next is LSU with 2,600 points. So all of these schools in the league, who I know everyone wants to win a championship, it's kind of difficult right now. So there's goals and there's reality, and reality is Alabama's always going to stay up there at the time being. But LSU and Georgia running neck and neck for number 2. Auburn and Tennessee tied at 4th. Actually, over 4 years, their average absolutely dead tied. Then you got A&M, Florida, Ole Miss, and down the line. When you look at these numbers, when you look at the rankings, Tennessee 4th in the league, 4th, 5th in the league over the last 4 years. Is this year's class good enough, Jimmy?
I don't know. It's hard to say. Jesse, I think Tennessee filled their needs. The question is, did they fill needs with good enough players? We won't know that for a few years down the road. I like what they did on the defensive line. I like what they did at cornerback, at linebacker, and at running back. But in some areas, you have to wait and see. Look, there will be some 3-stars that become all SEC players. There'll be some 5-stars that are bust. But if you gave me an option, I'd rather have 25 stars. I'll take my chances instead of 23 stars, because a higher percentage of those 5 stars you think will become great players.
Agreed. Jesse, go ahead.
I was just going to chip in. The biggest thing with this class is that Butch Jones and his staff are really betting big on their ability to kind of mine and develop talent. They believe they've identified some guys that maybe other schools didn't prioritize, but ultimately the way this is going to pan out and if this class is going to be a success is if they're able to develop these guys into all SEC players.
And we showed last week on the show that they have evaluated pretty well on a lot of those 3-star guys that played last year. So you take some of the injuries out, who knows what their record is last year. So in the past, I think you'd have to say their evaluations have been pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. But when you get all 3 stars, it needs to be better than pretty good. Chuck and Mike, your thoughts on this class? Is it good enough?
Maybe not. I mean, when you look at it.
That's not an answer.
Well, I mean, it's like Jimmy says, 3 years from now you'll be looking at it, and that's really when you evaluate it. I think people get a little bit too caught up in the right now. The question is, and it's all going to come back to this, can you coach them up? I mean, if you can't, then you're really going to be in trouble.
Well, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. I'm not going to get ahead. I don't want to get ahead of anything.
Yeah, I was planning on getting you in trouble in the second segment.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I just want to say, I think a lot of it depends on the character. I think if you look at what Butch Jones and Tennessee are trying to do right now.
5-star character?
I'm not, you went
Okay,
there,
go
not
ahead.
me. I'm just saying, I've had a chance to meet some of these kids, and I like what they're about. You look at their stories, you look at the backgrounds, the DeAndre Johnsons, the Shannon Reeds, the Trey Smith. Is Trey Smith a future leader? Is he a catalyst for a championship march? Because what it comes down to is having enough players that are willing to make the sacrifices and do the right things in the offseason that win championships. Ultimately, you can have all the talent in the world, but if these guys don't work hard and they're not championship driven, you're not going to get the results, John.
Look, if you give 3 stars to Nick Saban, he's going to get more out of them than most coaches in the country, I think. All right. So James Franklin, he didn't have a lot of 4s and 5s at Vanderbilt when he was winning. However, he didn't win championships when he was at Vanderbilt. So
and there was questionable character decisions when he was recruiting at Vanderbilt.
well, okay,
Tennessee
but he was winning despite that. That would be the opposite of what
What
Mike's
Mike
saying.
was
And
saying.
Butch Jones wanted other 5 stars. He just ultimately didn't land.
Yeah.
Cam Akers, 5-star running back. Tennessee was in the mix for him there. They wanted LeBron Ray on National Signing Day. They want 5 stars as well.
But they aren't looking at their stars.
And I go back and
We'll
look
get to
at
that.
all of the years Tennessee had to go outside of the state to recruit. Did you get enough of the best players in the state?
do that all the time anyway.
To me, though, that's
That's-
what this class is going to be. If this doesn't pan out, what you're going to remember is the fact that you had 2 or 3 guys in state
That you didn't get.
that you didn't get. I mean,
Historic year in state. Three consensus 5 stars. Jacob Phillips was bumped up to a 5-star linebacker. It's a tough blow to only land 8 kids from the Volunteer State, and then you get 7 from the Sunshine State. It's a difficult
It was a
proposition.
tremendous year because out of the top 25 players in the state, 21 signed with Power 5 teams.
which is
21.
it also shows where this state is going. We've been talking about
getting
the
a lot
last
better.
3 or 4 years. It has
Yes.
really changed over time. It is not the same state that Philip Fulmer and Johnny Majors recruited in terms of talent. You'd still have to go out and round out your class, but you can get more of a nucleus from Tennessee now. And they had made such a push with it and done so well in it that it's almost a double setback, a surprise. You're anticipating, okay, well, we're going to keep this Tennessee thing going, and you didn't. So I think that ticks a lot of people off too.
They
The
believe
last 2 years they have not.
Right.
And they believe 2018 is going to be a really high priority in state. It's probably a deeper group, just not as top heavy. And Tennessee has already made significant inroads with a bunch of these top prospects that they feel confident in. Ultimately, will be here next year.
And they already have a 5-star committed in Cade Mays, the son of Kevin Mays, former Vol. Jesse, you wrote very quickly here, like 30 seconds. You wrote this week that Tennessee, 24 decommitments over the last 2 years, 13 this past year. Now, to be fair, some of those Tennessee moved on from people and then they decommitted. But your takeaway and what conclusions do you draw from the fact they've had so many decommitments the last 2 years?
Ultimately, that Tennessee has accepted commitments too early from way too many people. They've loaded up these classes the last 2 years in the summer. Butch Jones was asked about it on Wednesday. He said it's a year-by-year thing. I'm going to be interested to see if they do it again this year. They had 14 guys between June and August, only 7 ended up in this class.
It worked his first couple of years because what happened was guys would move on, but he replaced them with better guys later on. That didn't happen this year. It's just guys moving on. And then you replaced with a lesser star rating. But when we talk about Hart okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. Next, we're going to talk Tennessee basketball. Bad loss at Mississippi State last night. What went wrong? And is that the death knell for Tennessee's NCAA tournament hopes? I don't think I've ever used death knell on our show before, but I did just then. We'll discuss whether it is or not next. Come on back on the Sports Source.